Hey guys, how's it going? I'm back here with another video, and today I decided to start a very simple, probably 2 video series where I teach you guys how to make a chat application using WebSockets, and we're going to be using Socket IO together with ReactJS and NodeJS for the backend. So this is going to be full stack, and it's basically going to be an application where you start with a sign-in page where you can put like your name and the name of like a room you want to enter. So basically you're going to we're going to be dividing the chats into rooms, and this is how we're going to decide which chat you're in, so with which person you're talking to. So it's going to be like a real application, and I'm going to be teaching you guys how to make it. So first of all, we created here I open VS Code, and I'm inside of the folder where I want to make this application, and I'm going to open my terminal, and as always I'm going to create a folder called client, and I'm also going to make a folder called server. This is the division between the front end and the back end, and for this video I guess we're only going to be working with the client folder. So let me come here to client, and I'm going to be creating actually I'm just going to write npx create react app and a dot, meaning that we're going to create a React application inside of the client folder. And whilst we're doing this, I'm going to come to my server folder, so cd server, and I'm going to start with what happened. Cannot create a project inside of, I completely forgot, you can't put capital letters. So let me just make it equal to client, and I'll make this equal to server like this as well. So server. And now let me try to create the React app again, and it's going to start creating. And while I'm here, I'm going to start my node application on the server folder, so you can see I'm inside of the server folder. I'm going to write npm init. This is how we create our file. It's going to ask for a package name. We just press enter for all of this, and now you can see that inside of our server folder there is a package.json. And that means that now we can just npm install all of the different packages that we want. And in this case, what we want is Express, right? So we want Express, and we also want course. The reason for this is Express is the framework we're using for creating our server, and course is because we're going to be communicating with a React application in the front end. So that's basically necessary. For now, let's just add this, and I'm going to press enter, and everything should start installing. And you can see that now all of these packages appeared. We're going to create our index.js file, which is going to be the starter point for our server. And for now, let's just start creating our server. So it's going to be very simple. Like as always, when you create an Express app, you always start the same way. So const express equals to require express. And if you don't know what I'm doing, like if you've never made an Express server before, I would recommend checking out my videos. I have a bunch of videos teaching exactly this. So I'm not gonna focus that much on this kind of small stuff, because working with sockets is a hard thing. So I would recommend already having some experience with it. And we're also going to import course equal to require course. And literally course isn't something that you should worry about. Whenever you're working between a node application and a React application, trying to make the communication, you gotta import course and simply apply the middleware by writing app.use course, and this should remove all the errors that it causes. So at the bottom we want to create we basically just want to write app.listen, and this will start our server. So initially we gotta pass a port value, so a port number. We're going to create a server in the port 3001, and then we can pass a function. This function will be just a function that says just console logs the word server running on port 3001. This will just say to us that we're running our server and everything should be working. Now everything was installed. You can see that on our client folder a bunch of stuff appeared, and we're going to focus on that later. We're just going to, for now, come here and try to run our backend by writing node index.js. Index.js, remember, is the name of the file. Let's see if it runs. If it runs, it should console log. Well, it says error, and I literally have no idea why. Let me see why. Well, already in use. Oh, I guess I was already using 3001 for some reason, so let's change this to 3002. And let's change this as well. Yeah, I have another application open, that's why. So let me run this, and now you can see servers running on 3002. If I come here and write localhost 3002, you can see that the server is running. It says cannot get slash, but that means it's running and it's working. So now that we've done this, we've had a simple setup of our backend. Let's go to our front end and start setting up our React application. So our React application, we're going to write yarn start. We're in the client folder, so when we write yarn start, it's going to try to run an application, and you can see on the localhost 3001, our simple React app will appear. And this is the starter package of a create React app application. So we're going to erase most of this stuff because we don't want this. So what I usually do is I just come here, and whenever this starts, I erase this, the app.test. I also erase the index.css, the logo, the service worker, and the setup test. I only leave the app.js and the index.js and the app.css. So since we erased a bunch of stuff, we gotta erase everything that those things were calling. So I'm also gonna make this not strict mode. And these are all standard, you don't even need to do this. This is just stuff that I do. So I'm gonna erase this. Now that I save this, now I can come to my app.js, and I'm gonna erase everything that starts, the application starts with. I'm also gonna erase the logo, and now we should just have an empty application. And let's take a look. I guess we need to reload the application, so let me try it again, and everything should be correct. This sometimes happens. It's okay, but yeah, now it's working. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna set up our initial page, right? So this is in the app.js. We're going to have two conditions. One of them is if you chose if you chose to pass if you chose your room, if you want to enter in a room, and if you didn't. So what we got to do initially is we got to create a state called entered room. So no, not entered room. Let's just say logged in, and it's going to be a Boolean. And what it will represent is basically a Boolean saying if you've logged in or not. Basically, if you entered your name or in the room you want to enter to or not. And this will allow us to make it so that we will render the chat if it's logged in, and if it's not, we're going to render a simple interface where you can enter your name and the room you want to enter with. So let me just come here, and for now I'm going to add an H1, so we space this out. And I'm gonna add the condition if not logged in. So if we are not logged in, then we want to render the page we're going to be creating first. So let's do it like this. And if we're logged in, then we want to render the chat, which we're going to be creating on a different component, so it doesn't really matter. For now, let's just make it so that let's just write an H1. So let me close this. H1. What's happening? No, there's nothing. Okay, so I'm also going to pass an H1 over here, and this is going to say you are not logged in, and the other one will say you are logged in. So let me erase this, and if I save this, you'll see that it says you're not logged in, but if I change this Boolean to true, it should say you are logged in. But this doesn't really matter for now. This is not what we're going to be doing. I'm going to save this. And the idea is that we're going to be rendering two pages, right? So here, there should be a state. So let's erase this. And let's press enter. And inside of here, we're going to create the sign in. So let me create a div of class name log in. And this will be basically will be just a simple page where there's a button, where there's two inputs, one for your name and one for the button. And let me write here. So we're going to create an input of type text, and the placeholder will be like name, something like this. And let's just close this. And we'll also want another input saying room. So if you don't know what a room is, basically, if you wanna, when you log into WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger, they need to keep track of a room number, for example, to detect which chat this is. So basically, if you are in a chat with your mom, then you'll have a room number differently from a chat with your dad. So basically, this is the idea of what a room is. It's just a way to identify which chat we're participating in. So below this, we're going to create a button, and the button will say enter chat, and let's see how it looks. You see, it looks very ugly, and the reason for that is because we haven't actually done anything yet. So we created these three things. Let's kind of style it a bit. So let me come to my app.css. This is what the thing already comes with. So I'm going to erase everything, and I'm going to grab the app. So it starts with an app class. So what we're going to do is we're going to give it a display of grid for now, and we're going to place item center. This will allow us to place everything in our screen. So place items right in the center of the screen. So you can see everything is centered. And the reason why it's not over here is because we actually haven't set the app to be of height 100%. Let's take a look. Oh, let's not actually use 100%. Let's use VH. VH basically says that we want 100% of the whole screen, so our size, and we also want to remove any borders or any paddings. Because, for example, if I add a background color here and I say aqua, you'll see that there's kind of like a small padding, right? So we got to remove that. In order to remove that, we're going to come here, grab the body, and the body, we're going to remove any padding. So padding 0, and we're also going to remove any margin. So margin 0. You can see that now it works perfectly and everything is in the center. Let's remove the background color, and let's create kind of like you see we have a login component, right? So we can come here and grab login, and it's going to be kind of like a square in the center, not a rectangle in the center. So let's make it of width 500 pixels, of height 300 pixels, and let's also add a border of 2 pixels, solid blue, I guess. I wanna get it I wanna grab a cool color. Let me actually just put random numbers over here, and let me use the color picker from my VS Code, and let's choose a cool color. Okay, I'm gonna use this. This is going to be kind of like the palette for my thing, and let's take a look to see how it looks. Oh, let me actually also add a border radius of I don't know, 7 pixels. Let me save this. You can see this is the square in the middle. It's too small. Let's make the width equal to 600. And should it be fine? Yeah, I guess this should be fine. Let's also add a background color. I actually want to make it a bit dark. So hashtag, I don't know. I'm gonna, for now, just use the color picker again. And let's grab a kind of like I want this kind of color. No, this looks bad. Let's just grab a simple dark gray. Okay, let's take a look. This should be fine. Let's increase the size of the border to like 5, and let's increase the height to like 350, and that's okay. Actually, I don't want it. I don't care if it is that beautiful. It should be like okay. Let's make it 10 pixel for the border radius. Okay. And now we need to style this inside of the container. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna come here and we're gonna add a display flex. So the display flex will have justify content center, and what I'm thinking is also align item center. What I'm thinking is we're going to change. Actually, the flex direction should be fine. We're actually gonna divide this into 2 stuff. The button should be outside, so we're gonna add two divs. One of them will be for the inputs and the other one will be for the button itself. So let me add a div. This is going to be a div with a class name called inputs. So we can just come here, and instead of the flex direction currently, you can see now the div, like the inputs are next to each other, but the button is below it. That means that they have different flex directions, and that's perfectly what we want. So let's come here. And wait, I don't get why it's not perfectly centered. I guess we need to add No, that should be working. So let me take a look. Let me try to make this display grid, and then place items center as well. Center. Let's see. Yeah, now everything is centered, and it's kind of like what I wanted, right? So if I come here and then now I grab the inputs. So inputs, I can make the inputs look a little bit better. So what I want to do is I want to add a margin to them. So a margin of like 10 pixels, and I also want to make the width equal to like, I don't know, 100 pixels, and the height to be like 40 pixels. I want the border to be the same color as what we were doing, or probably, let me see, the border should be like this, and I guess that should be fine. Let's take a look. It doesn't look perfect. Let me make the background color transparent. So background color transparent, and let's increase the width. So let's make this 200. Let's save. Okay. Now let's remove every effect when we focus. So focus. By the way, I know you might not be understanding, like if you're not understanding everything related to the CSS, like doesn't really matter at the end, because CSS is just something that you can literally just copy and paste. Before memorizing most stuff related to CSS, I used to like just copy and paste stuff, so that like it doesn't really matter. So you can just go along with it. So 10 pixels, you can see now everything is here, and I want to change the color. So let's make the color equal to white, and I just realized the border is too big. Let's make this 1 pixel, and no, not 1 pixel, 2 pixels. Yeah, 2 pixels should be fine. And let's increase the size of the font. So font size is equal to 15 pixels, something like this. And now it looks good in my opinion. Here you can write your name, so Pedro Machado, that's my name. And here you can write a room number or a room tag or an ID. So let's, for example, write, I want to talk to my mom. So this is like the name of the room. So this should be fine. And over here we want to have the button, but the button currently is too far away, and I kind of hate that. So let's grab the button, and what I'm thinking is maybe like it should be working with the display flex. I don't actually understand why it's not working. Let's change this to, let's try again. So let me change this to flex, and let's make this justify content center, and let's save it. Well, and if we remove this for now, like we're just gonna try to access the button. So if we remove this, let's see how it looks. Now it looks better, and the reason why it looks better, I know it doesn't look like perfect, but it means that at least it's not over here. So what we can do is we can come here to the login, we can add a flex direction of column. So it means that stuff will be stacked on top of each other. And if you don't know why this is happening, the fact is that we created a login div that contains 2 items initially. It contains a div called inputs and a button. So when I say flex direction column, I'm saying that inside of this, I want to stack everything inside of it on top of each other. So I'm only stacking these 2 stuff on top of each other, this div and the button. But now inside of it, inside of the div, there's 2 inputs that I want them to be next to each other. So initially, inside of it, inside of the div for the, as you can see here, inside of the div for inputs, they are already initially stacked next to each other. So that's why it's working. So if we come here and grab the button, I want to change the button to a little bit larger. So width 200 pixels and height of like 50 pixels. I want to, I don't know, let me see, border none. This is like standard stuff, border none. I want to also use the same color as this. So let's make the background color equal to this, and let's make the color of the text equal to white, and finally let's increase the font size to be equal to like 15 as well, 16 pixels. Let's take a look to see if it looks good. It looks okay. Let's add a margin top of like 15 pixels. I actually wrote 25, and that's actually okay because we want to make it a little bit larger, 45. Okay, that's fine. You can see that now we have a button, and I'm gonna add some hover effects because I have PTSD. I can't not do this. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna give it a hover effect, and the hover effect will contain a cursor of pointer, and let's also make the background color a little bit darker. So how do I make this darker? I'm gonna come here and I'm gonna push this a little bit down. So when I save this, you can see that when I hover my button, now the cursor is a pointer and the background color is a little bit darker. So you can see we have our chat over here, and at the top here, by the way, I wanna kind of like add a header. So let me see if it will look good. Chat app. Okay, it looks horrible, so I'm not gonna do that. I don't want to waste time doing that kind of stuff, but you can see we have all of this. And most importantly, now we want to add some parts of the functionality that we're going to be using with Socket IO. Basically, if you're working with Socket IO, it's probably better to start with the backend. So we're going to come here to the backend and the index.js, and we got to install Socket IO into our application. So let's come here and we're gonna come to our backend and we're gonna write npm install socket.io. And while it's installing, we want to come here and we'll just import socket IO. So let me come above here. It doesn't really matter, but I'll do this. Socket equal to require socket.io. And something that is important is trying to get stuff from the front end, right? We want to be able to parse JSON that is coming from the front end. And this is something that I recommend always doing if you're using Express. Try to apply this middleware. So express.json. This will allow us to send information from the front end to the back end. And I'll just say, like, remember to do both of this because it will always, I always forget and I enter into errors that I always have to figure it out and realize that it is because I forgot to do this. So just remember this. And one thing that is important now is to create our connection to our socket. So how we're going to do this is we're going to come here to our application. We're going to write IO equal to socket, and we're going to pass the server. But you might be asking, well, what is a server? Well, we haven't created this variable yet. And one thing we need to do is we actually want to do this below when we started listening to our application. And the server will basically be the connection to our server. So we're going to create a variable called server and set it equal to app.listen. This should be completely fine. Now we can use server as our instance for our socket. So now that we wrote IO equals socket server, you can just come here and start the IO connection. So IO.on, and we can pass here the word connection. Then we can just set a function that grabs a socket and it passes a connection. Well, we want initially for now to see if it's working. Let's console log the ID of the socket. Well, the ID is just like a random ID given to whoever logs into our application, because each person will receive a different ID, meaning we have different connections connected to our application. So now what we want to do is we want to create a way so that we want to start emitting and creating our sockets, right? So one thing we want to do is we want to socket.on disconnect. And this is a way so that we recognize and we're able to disconnect a user. So in order to do this, we're going to pass a function, and over here we can just say console.log and say user disconnected. Okay, so this is the basic standard, like the syntax. You start the connection and you console log the ID if you want to. I just want to make sure that it's working. And at the end, you disconnect if the user leaves your application. And inside of here, we can now start emitting our sockets, our messages. And what socket basically is a way so that we can constantly be sharing data between the front end, the back end, and itself in a way so that, for example, if I'm sending a message to someone, the person doesn't need, for example, to refresh the page, or the person doesn't even need to receive the message through a database. Like you don't need to send it to a database to send to another person. You're gonna send it through the sockets. So we can emit different messages and different data. And one of the things we want to create is the the join room socket, right? So we can come here and write socket.on join room. Actually, I'll do it like this: join room. This is the first thing we want to create because it's basically saying that whenever you join a room, you want to receive this data. So whenever you join a room, you can pass the data over here, meaning this is the data that you're sending, and the data in this case is the room number that we want to create. And we can come here to the bottom and just say socket.join and pass the data. Again, remember that data represents the name of the room that we're creating. So we're basically, when we say socket.join, we are creating a room with that name. And we can now, for now, just console.log the user joined room, and let's just plus data. We're just like console logging the room and the data where like the name of the room that the person is joining. And now we've just created a way so that the user can join. And let's now treat that in the front end. And in order to do that, we're gonna come here to the front end and we're gonna be installing a version of Socket IO, but for the client side. So if we close this and we come here to our app.js, I'm gonna come here to actually I'll just open another terminal. And in this terminal, you can see I'm in the client folder. If you're not, then navigate towards the client folder. And I'll just come here and write yarn add, or if you're using npm, you can also write npm install. For some reason, I just realized I'm using npm for the backend and yarn for the front end. But you can just write yarn add socket.io/client. This is the name of the package. It's a way so we can connect our backend to our front end using WebSockets. So we can just come here to the top and import this. So import IO from Socket IO client, and now we have an instance of this. One thing I like to do is I like to create the socket up here. So I can just write, for example, let socket. We created a variable called socket, and we can also create a constant, and this constant will be just the port, so connection port, and the port basically means the link for the backend. So we know that our backend is currently on localhost 3002, so this is literally what we're going to be putting here. So let's come here and just write, and let me remove this, localhost 3002, that's okay. So we can just come here to the bottom and we can create a use effect so that whenever you logged into this application, you're able to make those kind of initialize that socket connection. So use effect, I don't know what, like my keyboard is horrible today, but use effect, you can pass a function, and it didn't import automatically. So if it didn't, you can just come here and write use effect, and we just imported the use effect hook, and inside of here we can pass the socket to be equal to IO, and we can pass the connection port. This will initialize the connection, and this is great, but one thing we want to realize is that use effect is called like infinitely if you don't pass anything here, and what we want to pass here is basically the connection port. So if our connection port changes, we want to obviously change our socket to see if new connections are created. So this is just a simple way of doing it. We initialize our connection and this should be fine. So we want to create another state. So it's going to be called room, and it's going to be just a value representing the name of the room that we want to create. So use state. And by the way, I'm gonna just make it so that it is a string. And while we're here, let's also create the state for the user name and set user name. And both of them are gonna be strings. I'm also going to be putting some space. And let's go to our inputs. And for the name, I want to pass an onChange event so that whenever you write on the name, we're passing value to that state. So as always, if you've never worked with states and inputs before, I have a bunch of videos teaching this, but basically if you want to set whatever you're writing on the inputs or whatever you're writing here equal to the state variable, you can just give it a non-change event, pass a variable e, which means event, and you can just write set username equal to e.target.value. Okay, now we can just copy this and do the same for the room, but change obviously the name of the state function. So set room equal to this. Now we have access to whatever we're writing on both inputs, and maybe what we want to do now is we want to finally initialize and emit a socket message, and we're going to do that by basically creating a variable called connect to room. So this is going to be basically a function that whenever we click on the button, it's going to initialize this, meaning that whenever we click on the button, we call this function, and finally we are inside of our chat. So connect to room will basically for now just socket.emit the name of the connection that we created on our backend. So if I come here to my index.js, you can see that we created a socket called join room, and we want to emit that on our front end. And the data we're going to be passing is very simple. We're going to passing the name. So we can just say room. And now whenever we say socket.emit, it's going to send the value room to to wherever we're receiving that socket with a name join room. And in this case, it is on the backend. So if you don't understand Socket IO yet, this is the basic syntax. And whenever you want to send data, you write socket.emit, the name of the socket, so join room, and the data. And wherever you want to receive the data, you say socket.on and the name of the socket, and you also pass a function receiving the data. So this is a very simple explanation, because I remember I had a very hard time understanding this, but I think it's a lot better to see this with whenever you're trying to join a room, either than just sending the message, because it becomes a lot clearer. Here you're just receiving the data and you're creating a room with that data. So for example, for now, let's just do this. So let me create let's grab the button, and on the button, let's give it on click event. And we're going to be passing the connect to room. And now whenever we click on this button, it should be connecting, right? So let's start our backend. I'll come here, I'll write node index.js. You see it's running. So by the way, let me close this, turn it over here in the middle. You can see that it says that a connection started, meaning that we've just created a connection, that our socket is working. But if we came here and wrote, for example, I want to join the room Brazil people. This is kind of like a group chat. And I click here enter chat, you might see that it says user joined room Brazil people. That means our socket is perfectly working. It means that we're sending information from the front end to the back end through sockets, no use of database, and that's exactly what sockets do. And we didn't even need to refresh any pages. It's just perfectly working, and basically that's the idea of WebSockets. But obviously you're here for us to make a chat app, but I don't want to make this video that long. So whenever you're seeing this, I probably already have the next video. I'm either going to make it today or tomorrow, but for this video, I guess this should be fine. So next video, we're definitely going to be making the chat as a whole. You're going to be able to send messages to each other and see data appearing in real time. Like you're going to be just like WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger. Maybe if you guys want, I can make a third video where you store the messages on a database, and whenever you come back to your application, you can see the messages that you previously sent. I've done that before. I have a project that I've done like a long time ago, so this is why I'm making this and making it even similar to what I did before. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you want to see more, please subscribe and comment down below. I post videos every single day. I'm going to continue doing that. So yeah, please subscribe. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I see you guys next time.